Coming up, Yesh Atid MK Moshe Kinley Turpaz reveals the real reasons that the Haredi draft bill is stuck in deadlock.
Haredi MKs tell me, Kinley, it won't work with us. We can't make the decision, not us, and not our rabbinical leadership.
And Likud MK Dan Illouz answers pressing questions about Netanyahu, the war, and the future of the Likud.
One of the things that I've learned since October 7th is that one of the mistakes that Likud made was not to be more strong and forceful in ensuring that the things that we believe actually happen.
This is The Deep Dive. Welcome back to The Deep Dive. I'm your host, Jacob Laznik. We have a great episode for you this week where we speak to two members of Knesset about the most pressing issues in Israeli politics. In the lead up to this episode, we spoke to our political correspondent, Keshet Neev, to break down the ins and outs of the current draft bill and what's keeping it stuck in Knesset. Here's how that conversation went.
So this draft bill is one of the most hot topic issues in the country currently. What's going on is basically we're in the process of developing a bill that is supposed to enforce Haredi, ultra-Orthodox conscription to the IDF. And this is all going on after we've just had 2 years of war,
Right.
and the IDF is consistently saying that they have a huge lack of manpower. But what happened was, after getting some green light indication from the Haredi parties in the government, which are Shas and United Torah Judaism, which had previously left the government
Right.
over the bill. So the fact that they're willing to now, engage in it and possibly return to the government is why it's being pushed again and brought for discussion. I think what's been going around is people saying that it's actually a draft evasion law, not a draft conscription law, because they don't actually enforce conscription in a stringent enough way to actually make a difference and to bring the Haredi recruits into the army. A lot of people are saying that the law is just going to be a tactic to stall time. And one of the reasons for that is within the sections of the bill, if passed, they're only going to start counting the quota of who came to enlist from the Haredi community in 2027, meaning that while the IDF is saying that, we need conscriptions right now, right at this moment, we're only going to really see what the results are in 2027.
If it doesn't work, we won't know.
Yes, and if this is only once the bill passes, once it makes it to the third reading, the chances of the bill passing have totally gone into murky kind of water, because while the opposition is super against this outline, the coalition is actually now speaking out about being out against it as well. So we have MKs and ministers from the coalition who are saying that they are going to vote against the bill without a doubt. And we have a whole group of other coalition MKs that are now slowly starting to speak out against it. The amendments that need to be made are that there needs to be true incentive to make people from the Haredi community come and draft.
When you say incentive, you mean positive as well, not just sanctions?
There definitely needs to be reforms in the IDF as well that will give tracks for the Haredi community to integrate, because it's not a simple transition to just bring someone from the Haredi community into the IDF.
Right. And I think that's an amendment that a lot of people are in favor of.
Definitely. So that's not part of the bill, though. The main aspects of the bill are the sanctions and the enlistment quota.
Okay.
Not making changes so much to the IDF itself. So when we're talking about this legislation, the aspects that need to be fixed, the aspects that need to be adjusted in order to bring true conscription is to bring harsher sanctions that are actually checked and enforced. Because if not, we truly are just stalling time until we get to 2 years from now and we look back and we see that, hey, no one actually drafted. There were previous versions of this bill that underwent 40 discussions in the Knesset. Now, each discussion is tons of time, effort. They bring in IDF representatives. They bring in lawmakers. Then it has to pass the reading in the Knesset. We have to gather enough votes from the coalition and the opposition. It's a really complex process. So to sum up, the IDF, the country, politicians are all calling for a bill that will actually bring Haredi men to the army. And we're right now in the process of trying to find a way to come up with a legislation that will do that without taking political considerations into account.
Now that we have a better general understanding of the issue, I'm proud to introduce our first guest of the week, Yesh Atid MK Moshe Kinley Turpaz. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
So first of all, can you tell us about yourself? I think you have a very interesting story that not so many people are familiar with. So who are you?
Yes, so I'm Moshe Turpaz, nicknamed Kinley, which is my former family name. I was born in Philadelphia, but grew up, raised in Haifa and then in Jerusalem in modern Orthodox communities. Learned in high school yeshiva, and then Hesder yeshiva. Served in the paratroopers, served there for 3 years as a sojourn officer. And then I went into education. I worked 25 years in education, including a principal of a high school in the valley of Bet Shean, and then head of education here in Jerusalem for 5 years. I came into politics with this agenda and background, but I also brought a background of security of many years. I was a platoon commander, a battalion commander of paratroopers in the reservist paratroopers, a commander of battalion. And then I was chief of operations of the Gaza division for over 10 years in this war for 3 months as chief of operations of the Gaza division from the 8th of October, one of 2 MKs that served. I also bring a background of state and religion, and these are the 3 areas I'm focused on for the 5 years I've been in Knesset now. So it's state and religion, security, and education. I do see myself as a kind of bridge because I'm also coming from the more right-wing part of the country and yet in a centered party like Yesh Atid. I live in a settlement like Far Etzion, a modern Orthodox settlement, but it's a settlement, and yet I'll bring the liberal values I grew on, and I'm trying to connect different people in Israel. So I'm fighting for the draft of Haredi into the army, but I have many Haredi colleagues and friends, including some of them working with me on the draft in order to integrate Haredim in the army. I've been on Arab and Jews initiatives trying to connect right-wing religious people with Arabs, and I see this country, our amazing Israel, as something to work on. And that's why I'm in politics. Hopefully we'll continue there.
Well, you sound more than qualified for the topics we're about to start to talk about today. So let's begin.
Thank you very much.
So there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of politics that have been going on over the past week. I mean, the past few years, but definitely the past week.
Yes.
I think the most pertinent one would be the Haredi draft and the drama that was in the Foreign Affairs Defense Committee that we saw last week. So I want to ask you your thoughts on that, as in not just Haredi draft in general, but specifically about the bill that was presented.
Yes.
What are its issues? What was different this time that last time that has everybody, up in a storm?
Well, I'm actually well invested in this for 13 years now. 13 years ago, I became head of Jerusalem Educational Department.
Right.
And worked under Mayor Barkat, today Minister of Finance. And I got to know and to understand what the big challenge of the Haredi community is when I was in charge of a quarter of Haredi students in Israel, all living in Jerusalem under my authority. And then it was 2013 when the draft of Yesh Atid was passed. And I lifted a phone to one of my friends, my colleagues in the Ministry of Finance, and I told him, listen, he was in charge of security. So I said, wow, it must be a great day for you. And he said, actually, it is. So I said, let's just say thousands of Haredi boys are going to join the army. Who's going to prepare them? And there was a silence on the other side. And then he said, what are you suggesting? I said, look, I'm in charge of a quarter of the Haredi boys in Israel. All of them students in Jerusalem. When it deals with secular or modern Orthodox students, we have a whole program of pre-army.
Right.
And, we get them ready. When it goes to Haredi boys, there's nothing. So let's start something.
Talking about like mechinot preparation.
Exactly.
To start in like high school.
Actually going into high school.
Okay.
So he asked me how much money you need, and I said a sum. And as a good Otsar boy, he said, you've got it. So I had the money, and now I needed a program. I didn't really have a program. So I went to the programs for religious boys, but it needed a lot of adjustment. Finally, 2014, I made a new program, and I built a program bringing in Haredi boys to the Givati unit. This is a platoon still existing in Givati called Tomer,
Right.
only solely for Haredi boys. 2 years later, I was reached out by the army, and they said, you're doing a great job with Givati. Now we want Tzanchanim, the parachuters. I said, great, I'm from the parachuters. And so since then, over 2,000 Haredi boys served only in combat units through these two platoons. So I'm not invested not only in the idea, but also with
The process.
How do you do it? And, the reaching out to Haredi boy. What's the most, I'll tell you one interesting thing. I once asked a Haredi soldier, I visited near the Gaza Strip. This was 7 or 8 years ago. What was the hardest part of the first stage in the army, the tironut that you did? Now, usually soldiers say it's a sadaut, it's a week you go out of the base and you're only, in the field with your colleagues, your commanders, and God.
Yeah.
That's it.
Traumatic.
And yet the Haredi boy said, no, that was okay, that was hard. But the hardest week was the educational series, Sidrat Chinuch. Now, usual soldiers see this as an easy week because,
they love it, yeah.
you love it. You sit in a
sitting
class,
in air
you're
conditioning.
talking about education, and it's a rest from the hard training part.
Right.
And he said this was the hardest part because I didn't learn any of the things they were talking about. I saw Herzl as a demon, and suddenly I learned of him as a hero. He's the prophet of the Zionist country, and
Right.
I was always taught he's the demon, and now he's the prophet. So this was a whole change. It showed me how many differences there are we don't think about when we think about Haredi soldiers in the army. I think the draft of the Haredim and the integrating them to the army is the number one challenge of the army. Now, before 7th of October, this was a debate.
Right.
Today, it's a consensus. We know today 1 of every 4 12th grade graduate is Haredi. If we don't have the Haredim, we don't have the potential isn't there.
So bringing it back to last week's debate and discussion that was in the committee, what did you see was a problem that doesn't allow this law to achieve those goals, to solve this issue?
Look, the current law of Bismuth gives us nothing. I mean, the things that have been working for us in the last 2 years is the fact since the former law expired in June 23, the situation of a Haredi boy has been worse and worse by the month. So as months passed, they lost the budgets for the yeshiva. Then the Haredi, the Bismuth law returns them in 2 stages. First one immediately.
Right.
They get back 50% of the budget. Then whatever goes with the young family or Haredi family, they lose the special stipend for me'onot, for the kindergartens. They return the law returns it immediately. So whatever was making some progress
Is being undone.
And areas which are non-relevant are returned, like, driving license until the age of 23. Now, that won't change anything. Not having the leave to leave the country, that doesn't change for most of the Haredi boys. So actually the rabbinical leadership is very happy with the Bismuth law because it's actually helping them have the boys prisoned in the yeshivas till the age of 26, which is not heard of, and I think they want it. So there's nothing good about the Bismuth law legislation. I think also it's now more and more understandable. And we actually have today 10 religious MKs from the coalition who are at least loudly saying we won't vote for it.
Right.
Now, Netanyahu is an excellent campaigner, and he'll use all his effort to pass it because he wants the next elections to be the later he can, and he has his trial to deal with. So it all comes together when giving the Haredim whatever they want.
What I've heard a lot is that essentially the bill that Bismuth was presenting is also kind of stalling for time.
Yes.
Because a lot of the mechanisms in order to see if, if these draft orders that were sent to Haredim, if they actually followed through, they would only start counting in, I think it was like 2027 or something.
Yes, exactly.
So,
Look, one of the tricks used here is a very, basic trick, and yet the Haredim want to pay in credit and be received in cash. So they get back the budgets now, and they're checked and they're balanced only a year and a half or 2 years ahead, which is exactly what they have been. Now, some people think this area has started just this year or second year. We've been dealing with integrating the Haredim into the work area and the army area for over a generation now. It's actually 27 years since the first unit for Haredim was built, 1998. And I think for those 27 years, we've done everything on the good side. It's been only carrots, as we say. Now it's time for sticks. There's no other way. And when I have intimate talks, and I do have, with Haredi MKs, those straight ones tell me, Kinley, I'll tell you straightforward, it won't work with us. We can't make the decision, not us, and not our rabbinical leadership. It's up to you. And that means we have to be out of government for a few years. Pass the draft, use the sticks, use the economic side. It's a very strong side because we're a poor community. And you see 50, 60% of us coming in. The extreme ones will never go to the army.
Right.
We have tens of thousands of Miluim serving as we speak. And that means you're missing 2 or 3 months of the year every year. How long could that go on with 100,000 Haredi boys still in yeshivot?
Right, absolutely. So we've talked about, the sanctions and the lack of sanctions in the current bill, the sticks as we would call them.
Yes.
Do you think that if those are reinstated, would the next proposal for a bill be ready to go, or are there still carrots in place that need to be reformed? Because we talk a lot about, the sanctions and, enforcing it, but is the IDF really as ready for Haredim as we would like it to be?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, look, I learned in politics, it's again a Jewish saying, "Kol hameshane yado al hatachtona." When you want to make a change, you have to make a much bigger effort because you're the changer. But today, actually, from June 23, the timely draft expired. So today, all Haredim are supposed to serve in the army, and if they don't, they also lose some of their budgets, and they're also actually villains.
Right.
Now, I think so. We don't really need to change anything. We can just go on, but having a government which will be much more focused and less dependent on the Haredim will mean they'll have to draft because they're losing everything.
Right.
They can't leave the country. They can't have a driving license. They can't get a budget. I think we should just enforce the current law. We don't need any new law. If we want to negotiate anything with the Haredi community, it's about having a small group. Ben-Gurion gave 400. We could give 800 or 1,200 of every year leave for the best learners to stay in yeshiva. But then all the rest are demanded to go to the army or Shorut Leumi, actually. So if your way of life or whatever doesn't let you, some Shorut Leumi could be taken in that, but this is after the army took all it's needed. Now we know the army said it needs 12,000 soldiers, and the only potential are the ultra-Orthodox. But the truth is we need more because this still depends on taking the army to a 3-year service, which now was shorter, and having 30, 40, 50, 60,000 of Miluim soldiers at every moment. If we had another 10,000 soldiers, we could leave 100,000 Miluims not to serve this year. Give them the leave for a year. So the truth is, whichever soldier will bring in will let 10 Miluim soldiers leave for a year. That's a huge thing. So I'm telling you, the army is ready today. If the Haredi boys will come, we'll see the change.
And they can draft and they can still lead a respectable Haredi life.
Yes, but the truth is, look, I can't be in charge of your beliefs or what you decide to, to observe or not to observe. I have to give you the potential and the option.
Right.
So I'm taking a big decision by deciding there'll be no women in Haredi units. It's a big change.
Right.
And it's a kind of actually downgrade for many women that have decided to save. I mean, we have today 40% of religious girls serving in the army.
Right.
Now, some of them will have to cut units. We'll have to decide. So if you're in some of the units, we'll have, let's say, 2 battalions with boys and 2 battalions with boys and girls. Those are changes the army is ready for the minute the Haredi boys will come.
So I want to move on to another very big story. This obviously happened last week, but everybody's still talking about it. We did basically a whole episode on it. Netanyahu's pardon request.
Yes.
So we spoke a lot about, the legal requirements and stuff around that. I'm more interested in, your take on it. What Yesh Atid is kind of doing about it. Where's your efforts focused? Is it on Herzog? Is it on the courts? Is it on the public? Because I think our consensus was basically this isn't really a pardon request. This is asking for a favor from Herzog specifically, shaped as a pardon in order to get the charges dropped.
Look, as I see it, there's nothing to do with it. I think Netanyahu's trial has done a lot of damage to Israel, but the only one to blame is Netanyahu itself. You're not put to trial in Israel unless you've done something. And Netanyahu, as I follow from far away the trial, some things he may be, he has done, some maybe he hasn't, but that's a trial. And I don't think a prime minister in any country, and specifically not in Israel, should be dealt different than any other citizen. Now, he gets a lot of privilege because he's a prime minister, and yet being put to trial. I mean, and he's not the first one. We had a president who went to trial and to prison. We had a prime minister going there. We had many ministers. So asking a pardon before the trial ends, I think is not legitimate things. And I actually think there's a wide coalition of right-wing and left-wing, coalition and opposition people that say, why? Let the trial finish. Let the judges do the work. And whatever will happen is okay. I mean, these things he's totally innocent and he'll get the leave. These things he's going to prison. I don't think a pardon today is for the good of Israel. I think Netanyahu did here something which actually shows he's not so sure he'll be let off.
So if we go a little more local and less scandalous news,
Yes.
Recently you started an alternative education committee, which I think didn't get so much light in the media. So while I have you here, I was wondering if you could let us know more about that.
So I think many people don't understand that in our democratical system, the committees of the Knesset have a huge role, because the only thing before the Supreme Court that can stop or change or make decisions which are out of the governmental system is the committees of the Knesset. One of its main roles is to overlook what's happening, in my case, in the educational ministry, and to reach out to citizens and say, hey, we're your voice here. If you have something to say, tell us. We'll bring the officials to the committee. And if they won't come, or if they won't change the absurds of the system, we actually can pass legislation which will do that. So that's the force, that's the power of a committee in the Knesset when it's working. Now, about a month and a half ago, the committees of welfare, of health and of education stopped to exist. And the reason is Shas left government, but it also left its committees in the Knesset. And committee without a chairman can't come and work. So
these issues have just been unrepresented.
These committees haven't been coming together for a month and a half. And then I reached out about a month ago to the chairman of the Knesset, Amir Ohana, and said, come on, put a new person in from the coalition. I'm not asking someone from the opposition. And bring the committees to action, because we need them. There are tens of laws not passed. There are tens of issues that are not dealt with. They are absurd. I mean, we just had 3 students commit suicide in the last month. Nobody's talking about it. And because of political issues, Netanyahu forced Ohana not to re-elect a chairman because he wants Shas back if the legislation draft is passed. So again, we have no committees. So I said, okay, if there's no committee, for the first time for 77 years of Israel, we'll build an alternative committee. And I started the educational committee 2 weeks ago. And I just reached out and I said, what's the main issues on the agenda of education in Israel today? One is the special needs education, and the second is violence and committing suicides and boycotts of students. And I just formed 2 committees, one after the other, and I brought in tens of parents, students, ex-officials, because the current ones won't come, to an unofficial committee. And we had a very good debate in the Knesset. And when the debate finished, I wrote a letter of, main points going to the government saying you should focus on this and this.
Is there coalition members who are, also like taking part in this initiative, who are helping?
Well, some of them are saying to me, I'd love to come. But, it would seem absurd because we don't have a committee of our own. So you're like an opposition committee, although it shouldn't be like that. I come to committees of coalition. So I didn't have any MK from coalition, but a lot were interested. And some were saying, wow, you're doing actually what we should be doing.
Incredible. So yeah, you have your work cut out for you, but I'm glad that you're continuing it. And, I'm excited to see what the next few weeks bring, what the next few months bring. And I guess keep up the good fight. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure to introduce our next guest, Likud MK Dan Illouz. Thank you so much for joining us. So why don't you start by, introducing yourself, telling us a little bit about you.
So I was born and raised in Montreal, Canada. I moved to Israel when I was 23 years old. I didn't run away from anything. I know that right now Canada is associated with a lot of anti-Semitism and things like that. But when I was growing up, I never faced any anti-Semitism. I loved Canada. Okay. I still love Canada, but I loved Israel and Zionism, and I felt an urge to come here to Israel. And so I left everything after I finished McGill Law School. And I had opportunities all around the world. McGill is one of the best law schools in the world. And so I had opportunities in New York, London, France, Canada, and when all my friends suited up and went to the big law firms internationally, I put on a different type of suit. I put on an IDF uniform, joined the army, and moved to Israel. And that's basically when I decided that I wanted to dedicate my life to Israel, to the Zionist dream. And after I moved to Israel, with this same passion and dedication, I decided to also make a career of a public career, a public service career. And that's when I decided to go into public service. I didn't know it would be politics yet. When I ran for Jerusalem City Council, that's basically when I made the jump into being an elected official and not just behind the scenes or other types of public service. And then after I was a Jerusalem member of the Jerusalem City Council, I decided to also run for the Knesset. I did so in the last election. There's primaries in the Knesset, in the Likud, sorry. And so I ran into the primaries, got a spot. Trivia, which spot did I get? Number 33. And another trivia, how many seats did the Likud get? 32. And so I had to wait a little bit. I had to wait a little bit. I don't know how much people know about the Israeli system, but it means I had to wait a little bit after the election to get in. So I waited a few weeks, and then I ended up getting in when someone else left the Knesset. And since then, I've been working in the Knesset, trying to advance my agenda within the Likud and also within the Knesset as a whole.
Amazing. So I wanna talk about you and internal Likud in a bit, but I do want to get into some news, things that have happened over the past week. The debates on the Haredi draft bill. We had Moshe Turpaz in earlier who spoke about his thoughts, and you're one of the few coalition members who is also against the current draft as it is. So first, I'm interested to hear what are your issues with the draft bill?
So first of all, I want to say that in my opinion, the current situation is not great, but we have to ensure that any law that we pass doesn't make things worse, but should make things better.
Right.
I think that after October 7th, there's a huge need. Israel understood that there's a huge need for more soldiers. However we look at it, there's only one community, in the Jewish community in Israel, that doesn't serve. There's also the Arab community, and by the way, one of the things that I demand is that whatever sanctions are put on Haredim that don't serve should also be put on Arabs that don't serve at least national service or civil service, because we should be fair and it should be something that's applied to everyone.
Right.
But that doesn't change the fact that at the end of the day, when it comes to actual soldiers that will fight in wars, then the place where we can get more soldiers is the Haredi community. I think that in the opposition, there is a lot of politics that is played on this issue, and that while I come to the discussions of the committee intent of trying to find a good solution that will be passed, and on fixing the law which isn't good enough. And I'm saying right now, if this is the law that will be brought to a vote, I don't see myself supporting it. But I'm trying to fix this in order to bring it to a law that I can support fully and full-heartedly. I see the opposition just trying to break down the coalition. That's basically what they're trying to do. They're seeing this as a wedge issue. They're right, it is a wedge issue. And so they're seeing it and they're trying to play politics on it. I think that's unfortunate, because when you have existential issues on national security, then these issues should be way above politics.
Right.
I'm making them way above politics when it comes to me. I'm taking risks when it comes to my political future. I wish that there were people in the opposition that would do the same.
I think we can't ignore that Israel is starting to face a reality where we have to really properly address phase 2 of Gaza. There's one hostage left in Gaza, Ran Gvili. Obviously, this is an incredible achievement. I think a lot of us were worried that we would never get to this point. And obviously, his body must be returned as soon as possible by Hamas. But when it is, there are next steps that have to happen. Phase 2 has to start. There's questions about this international force in Gaza, this Gaza Board of Peace. And obviously, I'm not privy to all the details, but of the reports that we hear of discussions going on, it sounds like a lot of things that should have been in place are not necessarily in place. So I want to hear from you, what is... Right now, in Likud, what is their outlook on phase 2? Are we ready to transition to phase 2? Do we want to go to phase 2? Are there still people within Likud who want to go back to fighting now that, once hostages are returned? And what does the ideal versus, realistic day after in Gaza look like? Are we making a mistake? Should there be Jewish settlement in Gaza? All of these questions, the deadline of when to answer them seems to be coming up, because once there's no more hostages left, there's not really, anything to stall. So I'd love to hear your take on that.
I think the phase 2 that we agreed to is very clear, and that it's a phase 2 where Hamas is not in power in Gaza. It's not in power, and it's also not armed.
Right.
So it's not in power, and it's not in power in disguise, right? We were worried that the Hezbollah model that worked in Lebanon for Hezbollah a very long time, where they weren't officially in power, but they were the ones calling the shots, would happen in Gaza. And so if they're not in power and they're not armed, then we can speak about phase 2. If that's not the situation, then that's not what we agreed on. Said it all along, and the Prime Minister has said it all along, and I think that we need to make sure that this is what happens. If Hamas survives October 7th, after what they did, and by survive, I don't mean every last terrorist, right? I mean as a governing power in Gaza.
Right.
If they survive October 7th, then this is an existential threat to Israel. I said existential threat a lot in this podcast, but this is what we're
common theme in Israel.
This is what we're facing. The answer of what phase 2 means is essential to understanding whether we want to get to phase 2 or not. If what the president said happens, President Trump happens, which is Hamas is not in power and is disarmed, then it's something that we can speak about. I do want to say that I still, even in this context, am of those who doesn't want to see Turkey or Qatar involved in rebuilding Gaza. I think that the question of who will rebuild Gaza has a lot to do with how Gaza will look the day after. And if you have moderate forces, such as the Emirates, which I'm very close to the Emirates in my role as the head of the caucus for the Abraham Accords. And so I've seen firsthand how they have, they're very devout Muslims, but with an Islam that is very open to the world and very moderate to the conflict. And if they're the ones who come in, then they'll have their own vested interest in fighting radical Islam in Gaza. And then we can start to see some de-radicalization that's also essential for October 7th not to happen again. Because if it's forces that support radical Islam, Qatar, Turkey,
right, it'll just be the next generation.
It won't be called Hamas. It'll be called, I don't know what. Invent whatever ridiculous name you want, but it's going to be the same thing. But if it's positive actors, and I do want to say that the Saudis, in this sense, right now are on the right side of history when it comes to that. Even if they don't have a peace treaty with Israel, they are against radical forms of Islam.
Right.
And so if those are the actors that are involved, then the future might look bright. But if it's actors that have an interest in seeing the Muslim Brotherhood and the likes succeed, then the future is bleak. And so this is an essential question also that needs to be detailed. Israel's position was, let's first finish phase 1,
Right.
and then get into the details of phase 2. To be honest, it was clearly our interest for that to happen, right? Because phase 1 was the release of the hostages, and here we got the release of almost all hostages. I'm actually very close to the Gvili family, and so it's very hard to think of him as the last one that's there. And we still pray for him to come home, and we'll do everything we can in order for his body to be brought back home and buried in the way he deserves as a national hero. But as you said, I think that it's almost a miracle that so much of the hostages have been found, the living ones brought home alive and the dead ones buried here in Israel. And so we had a vested interest in splitting phase 1 from phase 2 in order to get our hostages back. And now that this is winding down, then we have to start discussing the details. I'm sure that this will be one of the top topics that are on the agenda when the Prime Minister Netanyahu meets with President Trump at the end of the month.
While what you're saying is very legitimate, that not all of the conditions of phase 1 have been met and people are talking about phase 2, there is in fact increasing pressure from basically all of the mediators, and sometimes including the United States. How is the Prime Minister pushing back from this? How is Israel sticking to its guns to make sure that in fact all of these will be achieved?
So we have to remember what the end goal is, and the end goal is Gaza without Hamas in power and without Hamas armed. Those are the two things that were promised to Israel when we got into this process. If the way to get there is a little different than what was planned initially, I don't think that as a country it would make sense for Israel to just lose so much diplomatic clout just in order to get it exactly the way that it was done before. But if the goal is not achieved, and I include in that goal also the de-radicalization of Gaza, which we spoke about. So if this is not achieved, then we have a very big problem. And again, you asked, I didn't answer that. Is returning to war on the table? Yes, it's on the table. We have to know that it's on the table. By the way, the Hamas gives us a ton of reasons why to go back to war, right? They they try to do terrorist attacks against our soldiers almost on a daily basis in Gaza.
Mashal said they're not going to disarm. It's looking bleak.
Yeah, but I'm saying even they're actively trying to kill our soldiers in Gaza, and this is a reason for us to go back to war.
We have very critical months ahead of us.
Definitely.
So you said in the beginning, you're from Canada. You didn't experience bad anti-Semitism in Canada. You love Canada. I think you would agree with me that the Canada today is very different in terms of anti-Semitism. This week there was a webinar where they hosted a Hamas terrorist. So I'm wondering on your thoughts as a Canadian, what do you feel about the status of Canada today? Are Canada's Jews safe? Is it getting worse? Is it going in the wrong direction? Is it going in the right direction?
So first of all, I started as a campus activist, my political career. So whenever I hear of things happening in campuses in Canada, this is really close to my heart. I can tell you that the Canada that I knew isn't the Canada that exists today. I speak to my family that's still there, my cousins, my aunts, my uncles that are still there. And it's not the same Canada. It's not in the community I grew up with. Someone was beaten up walking with his children to the synagogue or the school I studied at was shot at night in order to intimidate, not in order to kill, but still, what type of reality is that? The synagogue I used to pray to was graffitied. Those are very close to my heart. Those are like things that would have never happened when I grew up in Canada. The thing I can say is that Canadians are not anti-Semites. There is a large group of immigrants from Arab countries that have come. By the way, not all immigrants from Arab countries are part of this problem. I do want to be very clear. But there is a large group of immigrants from Arab countries that have come with their prejudices, with their anti-Semitism, which has been ingrained into them because in those countries, unfortunately, we know what they think about Jews and Zionists, and it's the same for them, right? For me also, I think that Zionism is a part of my Jewish identity. But when they try to say, "Oh, we only hate Zionists, we don't hate the Jews," and then they go attack a synagogue, then I'm just saying that for them also, those are the people that are spearheading the anti-Semitism, not normal Canadians, but those people. I want to say that normal Canadians are starting to become disgusted by this. But I do want to say that the political leadership in Canada is not doing enough. And I'm saying this very, very clearly. It's true of Trudeau. It's true of Carney right now. You guys are the prime ministers also of the Jews. And part of your mandate is to ensure that Jews can be safe in your country. And you don't have to play along with small political considerations that make you take on a pro-Palestinian tone just in order to get more mandates and ensure that the radical left doesn't get a few more seats. Do the right thing. Don't try to compete with the radical left for the pro-Palestinian vote. Do the right thing. Stand with the country that represents freedom, that's Israel, and stand with the community that is right now being attacked on your land, and that's the Jewish community.
And last thing, so I'm asking every MK that comes on because, elections are coming up. We've talked a lot about how you've spearheaded a lot of initiatives and you really seem to have made progress in areas that Likud in the past really hasn't been able to get going. So as elections are coming up, we have to ask, right? Over the past decade or a bit more, socioeconomically, Israel has struggled. There hasn't been progress in areas that people would have liked. And the contract was kind of, we're going to put that off for a side because we want to focus on security. And, Likud really prides itself on the stance of security. Now, if you look away what Israel's done since October 7th, and if we ignore all the kishkushim of who's responsible or whatever, the fact is October 7th did happen. And so a lot of people are saying, there was no socioeconomic improvement, but also there was no security. So as elections are coming up, what can you do to win back the faith of Likud? What does Likud still have to show for itself? Why, as elections are coming up, I should cast my vote for Likud?
So I want to say that I don't agree at all with your.
Of course, that's
with your description that the socioeconomic situation in Israel has not improved. I think that when I made Aliyah, the joke that the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu used to say is that it was a well-known joke in Israel, is that in order to become a millionaire in Israel, you have to make Aliyah as a billionaire. And then afterwards you'll be a millionaire because you'll lose a lot of your money. It's not true anymore. I know before October 7th, I know a lot of people that made Aliyah because of the opportunities that exist in Israel, specifically in the high-tech sector. I agree, the high-tech sector was much better than the rest of the economy, but the economy was doing well. It's still doing quite well considering the war. I do agree that when it comes to the prices and the cost of living, we haven't done enough. I'm a free market guy. This is my agenda. And before the war, this was actually almost 100% of my agenda. The war basically took my focus on things which were more urgent.
Right.
But I hope that I'll get back to these things. I think that the more you open up the market, when it comes to farming, when it comes to imports, when it comes to all of these different things, then you'll get more competition and the prices will go down. And I think that the future for Israel is incredibly bright, thanks to some of the economics reforms that we've done over the years, and thanks to the winning of the war that we've done. It gives us a lot of diplomatic clout, which makes a lot of countries want to have some good relationships with us.
Right.
And it creates an opportunity for Israel to, Israel was considered an island nation when it comes to economics. We're not an island, but when it comes to economics, we don't really have economic relationship with all of our neighbors. With Jordan, we've started having some.
Right.
Egypt less so, and then the rest were just enemies of ours. But now we're speaking about a plan for Israel to be the center of the world economically, thanks to the Abraham Accords, thanks to good relationships with India, thanks to a lot of these things. So the future is very, very bright for Israel economically. I do want to say that one of the things that I've learned since October 7th is that one of the mistakes that Likud made was not to be more strong and forceful in ensuring that the things that we believe actually happen.
Okay.
I mean, we opposed the disengagement. We opposed Oslo. I think that the right-wing ideology, even though the Likud supported it, but I have to say, frankly, I think it was a mistake, was to oppose, the right-wing ideology was to oppose the Gilad Shalit deal. I think that right-wing principles were right at every single step of the way. And one of the things that we haven't been good enough at doing is to ensure that the principles that we believe in are the ones that happen in the end. And that's, by the way, part of the reason why I'm so intent also when it comes to the draft law. I'm going back to our first discussion because I'm convinced that the Likud ideology is to ensure that there is an actual historical change when it comes to drafting, because we're a Zionist party that represents people who serve in the army and who send their kids to the army. And that's our belief. That's our DNA. And so we could say again, there's coalitions, we have to make compromises. Yes, compromise is not a bad thing. But at the end of the day, are we the ones setting the agenda? Or are we just going to go around and be basically the glue that puts together the coalition, let other ones set the agenda on a lot of things, and let Prime Minister deal with the big picture? He's doing a great job dealing with the big picture, but one thing that I've learned on October 7th is that we have to, as MKs, to be very, very intent on ensuring that our ideology is the one that leads the way. We're the big party in the coalition. We're the ones leading. The prime minister is from our party, and so we have the ones to be the ones leading the way. And I think that this is what the people of Israel actually want after October 7th. They want our ideology. I agree with you that the brand Likud might have taken a hit on October 7th. I think that since then, thanks to the successes of the war, we've rehabilitated part of it. And I think that if we will stick to our ideology, to our right-wing ideology, then our brand will be stronger than ever.
So you're saying we can expect a more robust, decisive Likud?
That's what I'm working on. And if I succeed, then this is what we will see.
Amazing. I want to thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, that's all we have for you today. We sincerely hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please consider liking and subscribing. We'll be back in the same place next week, but in the meantime, make sure to go to jpost.com to keep up with the latest news in Israel and the Jewish world.